The coal industry is putting South Africa's food security at risk. That's the sentiment of Grain SA CEO Pieter Taljaard. The industry group is concerned that the country's most fertile land is being used for coal mining and not being rehabilitated properly, rendering the land infertile. Taljaard joins us now to tell us more. Pieter, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Perhaps just to gain an understanding, you can help us make sense of the value chain of grain production.
Yeah, so it's quite important and a very critical industry, as we like to call it. It's really the start of the food value chain is grain and oilseeds, because it's a lot of the inputs. So beside the fact that white maize is a staple in South Africa, all the grain and oilseed products are basically used in other manufacturing for other food products, but also a critical input in the livestock industry. So a very important fact is that for the majority of grains, which is similar to all agricultural products, we are net exporters in South Africa, despite the fact that we are a relatively dry country. We produce surplus in this country, so we have abundance and we can export to neighboring African countries, but also in recent years, specifically if you look at yellow maize and some other oilseeds like soybeans, we are deep sea exporting to other markets, and that's also earning a critical income for farmers and making the value chain more profitable. So if you look at the supply chain or the value chain for agriculture, we have a very sophisticated and well-developed input industry that supply right through from machinery, seeds and technology, fertilizer, crop protection products, but also then in terms of the processing, well-developed and very also high technology driven, very much electricity used in that processing sector, but that's really putting affordable food on our supermarket and restaurant shelves. And those are the key things that we as South Africans need, is affordable food.
And then you argue that South Africa would produce even more summer grain crops if it were not for the coal sector. What challenge is the sector presenting?
Yeah, definitely. And this is not a new problem. This has been going on for quite a number of years now. So especially in the Mpumalanga Highveld, what we have seen, if you talk about coal mining, but also in other parts of the country, in other mines. But the Highveld is specifically important in terms of grain and oilseed production. So these farmers typically, where they produce on a crop rotation basis, they produce maize, mostly yellow maize, and then soybeans. They have the crop rotation system. But a lot of the fertile land, and this is a really high potential land because the rainfall is higher in the eastern part of the country than in the west. So it's really high potential lands that get taken out of production, and this is for a number of years. But the challenge is these land, once they are mined, they are basically lost for life in terms of any cultivation or production, agriculture production that you can do there. And it's just because the rehabilitation, firstly, in the majority of cases, doesn't take place, and secondly, where it takes place, it's done so poorly that the structure of the soil is really destroyed forever. The fertile land, which you typically find in the top 1.5, 2.5, 3 meters of the soil, and in many of these cases it's even shallower, are just wasted. It's mixed with all the other gravel and so forth, and when you just put it back in a unorganized and actually a foolish manner, it's not usable anymore. You can never get it back to the way it was created.
Pieter, so essentially there's not enough land for the two industries to coexist?
Well, if you do the rehabilitation, okay, probably you can get it back. But what's happening now, these mining companies are buying up large pieces of land. Once they mine it, as I said, it's gone forever. But they also hold land, and then farmers can still rent it from them. But the way these contracts work is even within a season, even if there's grain or oilseeds on the land, once they decide, or the engineer decides now it's time, or the project manager decides it's time to start mining there, they can even destroy the crop as it stands there. So yeah, it's really not possible to have it on a sustainable basis to go back. So if it was a case that was properly rehabilitated, you could argue that, yeah, you can go back. And it goes further than just the soil. It's also very important in terms of the groundwater. So where there's irrigation and neighboring towns, these groundwater systems are destroyed, and you can't continue to irrigate even on neighboring farms. So the wetlands is really destroyed. So it's really decreasing our ability to compete and ultimately our food security in the future.
And then you lay the root of the problem squarely at the door of the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. Why?
Well, they're responsible to ensure and oversee that the rehabilitation process takes place properly. And it doesn't. We can get into a plane this afternoon and we can go and take pictures and we can show you. I mean, there's many studies. I can take you to many universities in this country. Specifically, there's University of Pretoria, where there's a lot of rehabilitation studies being ongoing for many of years. And the studies just shows that it's simply impossible to get that land back into production if that is the way the rehabilitation takes place. So the problem is, firstly, there's a lot of rehabilitation not taking place, and secondly, the way in which it should be done, which should be overseen by the Department of Mineral Energy, it's not done. We can just imagine the reasons why it's not being done, but I tell you, it's big money. It do cost a lot to rehabilitate, and it's not happening in South Africa.
What do citizens need to know in terms of holding truth to power, for lack of a better phrase? Because if you speak to a threat to food security and the fact that we could be exporting much more than we are at this pace, what then is it that the average person can do? Are we laying ducks?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think there's many other examples, because if you look at the agricultural value chain, you talk about it, the poor level of infrastructure in terms of roads, or just the mere fact that we can't use the rail system in this country. And also then, at least the harvests are still working, but it could have been much better. So if you add that all together, the South African food consumer, the average household, could have been much better off in terms of this. If we can just get back, 20 years back, we were 80% of the grains and oilseed were transported on railway. In the 20 years, it turned around. Currently, it's less than 20% that's on the rail. And if we can just change it, the maize price will change by about 150, 200 rands per ton already. So that will mean a difference either in the pocket of the farmer or in the pocket of the consumer. So the consumers will ultimately be able to pay less for food, but it's just because the railway network is not working, and the resulting effect is that the road infrastructure, a lot of these roads were not designed to carry that load. And now, because of the rail infrastructure not functioning, the road infrastructure is further depleted, and I mean that lead to the condition that we are in with all our roads. It further devastates the road. So there's a lot of other things that really fails the final consumer, and well, at the critical industry of primary agriculture. We are simply just failing this nation with not being able to supply the necessary services, and also just to do the basic things like oversight in terms of rehabilitation, as I mentioned.
A very concerning picture you paint, Pieter. Thank you very much for your time. Pieter Taljaard is the CEO of industry group Grain SA. Okay, let's go.